Hello, back to After Effects. Now, I don't have my project open anymore, so this is the second in a series. I want to open up my project, so I'm just going to go File, Open Project. There's also Open Recent, which is really nice, and you can find the most recent project you were working on. There it is, Form, and previously I had made the clock face with my shape tool. Circle shape tool, and then a cloud. Started with a solid, made a mask of it, and then feathered the edges. So now I'm going to do some animation with them, but first of all, I'm just going to kind of move my clock around a little bit. I'm going to move the clock down a little bit here in the cloud because it's up in the sky. I'm going to kind of move it up a little higher. I just clicked on the selection tool to do that, and then I'm just dragging these layers around to move them around. Okay. So I'm going to make one thing more to go with my clock. I'm going to make a clock, just a hand for that clock. So I'm going to, once again, make a shape. Now, to make a shape, you have to make sure that nothing is selected. When I made the cloud, I made a solid. It was selected, and then I used the pen tool to draw that shape on it, to click those points, and then it connected the dots. But if I want to make a shape, I'm just going to kind of click to make sure nothing is selected. I'm going to click the rectangle tool, and I'm going to make my fill color. I want to make it blue because that'll be that clock hand is going to not be visible against the clock. So I'm going to make it kind of a middle gray here. I'm going to go OK and just draw a rectangle on above my clock. It's a separate layer. Everything that you want to animate separate from something else has to be on its own layer. I'm going to click on this, hit return, and call it clock hand. So there's my clock hand. Now, the clock hand, to rotate correctly in the clock, it's going to need to have its rotation point right in the center, basically, of the circle or on the end of the hand. When I have a layer selected, I'm going to see this little, somewhere on the screen, this little symbol here, and that is the symbol of the center, basically the rotation point or the anchor point of that layer. So if I go to this tool that's just to the left of the rectangle selection tool, I click on that, that's going to allow me to drag that rotation point to where I want it to go. Okay. Now, one thing I noticed about, I'm going to get the selection tool here and kind of move this up a little bit, try to get it in the center of the circle. I made my clock hand just a little too big for that clock. If I want to make it smaller, one quick way to make it smaller is to bring up the scale property. Now, we've been noticing there's this little arrow here and properties come down. Like when you draw a shape, you get the contents of it here. There's also this transform with all these transform properties that are going to allow us to do animation with the things we create in After Effects. So one of them is scale. Now I got a whole bunch of things here. If I want to just bring up scale, if I use the S key on my keyboard, if I just press S, I bring up scale. And now if I scale this down, so notice there's a 100%, 100%. The first one is the 100% scale on the x-axis. This is 100% scale on the y-axis, up and down, back and forth. And then this locks them together. So if you adjust one, it's going to adjust the other. So I'm going to click the one. I'm going to make that clock hand smaller. Notice it makes it smaller left and right and up and down both because those two numbers are locked together with this little lock here. Okay, so that's kind of the size I want it. I want to rotate it. So if I want rotation, so there's scale, rotation, and that's R on the keyboard. So that brings up rotation. Position is another one. We're going to be using that to move our cloud, and that's P. So rotation, notice there's two values here. There's 0 times plus 0 degrees. So with a rotation, 360 degrees is one trip around. So that's the X time, how many times around, and this is the degrees, 360 degrees. So at this point, we're at the top of our rotation. We haven't rotated at all. Now, I want to say that on my timeline here, see the playhead, the beginning, I want my clock to be in this position, this straight up position. So I want to make sure that at this point in time, that playhead's in this exact position. what I'm going to do is click on this little stopwatch next to rotation. That makes a keyframe. So this keyframe here, and you can see it down here on the timeline, it says that at the 0 point in time that this clock hand is at this position in rotation, okay, which is 0, 0. I just want my clock to maybe it's gonna just rotate around maybe 3/4 of the way by the end of my composition, which is 5 seconds long. So I just put the playhead at the end. On your keyboard, the end key is also a great way to do that. Also, this button here in preview will put the playhead at the end. Now what I'm going to do is I have to use my math here. So 360 degrees is one rotation. I want it to go around 3/4 of the way clockwise. So 90 degrees is basically quarter of the way around. 180 is half the way around. 270 would be 3/4 of the way around. So I'm going to go here to this and I'm going to type in 270 in there, and then my hand's going to be in that position. Now, it's a positive number, which means that my clock hand now is going to go clockwise. If I made a negative number there, so I'm going to just go to the end here and type in minus 270, it's going to go counterclockwise. So I want my clock to go clockwise, so I'm going to undo that a couple times. Oh, I did it too many times, so I'm going to go edit and just see if I can redo that last one. And so now my clock should be going, if I do it in the correct direction, I'm going to hit the space bar to play it. It's going clockwise around 3/4 of the way. Okay, so notice that I made that first keyframe, and then I moved the playhead, and then changed the value of my layer, my property of rotation, to 270. When I did that, After Effects made a second keyframe for me, just basically saying at this point in time, I want this value. And then what it's doing is it's what's called tweening. It's basically, instead of going directly from one keyframe to the next, it is slowly moving it just one little tick at a time between those two keyframes, and those are called tweens. Okay, it's doing it very smoothly, like a clock does. Okay, so I did some animation on my clock. Now I'm going to do some animation on my cloud. Now, I'm going to start the cloud here. Notice my playhead's at the beginning. I'm going to start my, maybe even a little off screen here. So notice the border of our screen. I got that by clicking Fit here in the view percentage. It's kind of going off the border, starting there. With my cloud, I'm going to hit the P key to because I want it to move. So to move something, you need to keyframe position. I'm going to click on the stopwatch here for position. There's my keyframe at the beginning. And I'm going to go to the end, and I want my cloud to be over here. So I move the playhead to change the time. Now I'm going to change the state, in this case just by clicking and dragging it. If I click and drag it and then hold on the Shift key, it keeps it in a perfect line. If I let go of that Shift key, I can move it up or down. Maybe I'll do it a little down there. I'm going to drag it so it's still a little bit on screen here. So notice my cloud now is moving from one keyframe to the next and tweening as it goes. What I just did is press the space bar to play that. Okay. Now, I'm going to go now, I'm going to put things in kind of a better order here. I'm going to take this clock hand, I'm going to drag it down on the clock. Now, I want to move my clock, but if I move my clock face, if I just click and drag it, I'm going to undo that. Basically, the hand does not move, but I want the clock hand to move when I move the clock. So if I go to the right here, where it says Parent and Link, right now it says None, I'm going to go and click on that, and then I want to parent the clock hand to the clock face. That connects the clock hand to the clock face. If I do something to the clock face, the clock hand, it's going to happen just as well. So now if I move that clock face, you're going to notice that the clock hand moves at the same way. So I can even go to my clock face, and if I wanted to move and follow along the cloud, I can just parent that to the cloud, and now when the cloud moves, the clock moves as well. Okay, so parenting is a great tool to use to connect one thing to the other in your animation. Okay. So I'm going to save that. So I made those things. I've done some animation with them using some of those properties. One last thing I'm going to do with my cloud is I'm going to click on the cloud. Now, one of those properties is opacity, and I like to say it opacity, because if you press T, it brings up the opacity. I'm just going to, the opacity is basically if it's 100%, you see it solid. If it's less than that, you see through it a little bit. So I'm going to reduce the opacity of my cloud, make it look a little more cloud-like. And so I can always keyframe opacity too to make it more or less fadey. And there we go. I have my scene. I'm gonna say goodbye for now, but there'll be more to come in another episode. Okay, thanks so much.